Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brodinsky, and somewhere on that split screen, I just got to split the screen. There he is Christopher K. Shortell. Chris, usually during meetings of boards of directors and maybe some nonprofits, the agenda is broken up into different segments. And once in a while, there's a segment called correspondence. I know when I was on the council, I didn't like that because it suggested that anyone could throw in any sort of piece of junk mail or grievance or something and it would be read and wouldn't be important at all. But for the first time in the life of the Citizen Mike Show, I got some correspondence that, yeah, and it came anonymously in a plain brown envelope, dropped in my mailbox, no postage, no postmark or anything else. So I just got to open it up here.
Don't rip it off. I thought you were going to tear it in half.
Very first time. Well, it was very well sealed.
Okay.
Holy smokes! Look what the heck! I don't know if you can see this. What is that? What did you send this?
I did not send that.
Well, what's it? It says you quit. It says I quit. Christopher K. Shortell. What the heck? What's going on here?
Well, look, this is my last day on the show as a regular. I reserve the right to come back as a guest next. I'm on the council for another year, as we know. But first of all, it's been awesome being on the show. I love being on the show. Even when we talk about CMEC and the audit and the parking lot, which we're going to talk about again tonight.
Oh no!
Or today, it's daylight. But this is sort of as I was evaluating what I was doing on the council and the decision not to run. Unfortunately, I had to make. Looking at the next year, I'm still on the council for another year. I'm not going anywhere till after the next election. And I did have to sort of look at where I was spending my time. And so I just felt like it was a clean breaking point. I joined the show a year ago. I think after the election, you had me on for what was billed as a 3-week guest stint. And I just never went away. So I felt like it was a good breaking point. And just sort of my first step into my exodus from local Wallingford politics. Not that I won't come back. I'm sure there'll be a chance to come back maybe at some point next year. But if you want me back to talk about anything, but yeah, so I'll be leaving. But I'm grateful. I want to thank you for having me on. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity because. And I don't know if he's watching because Ralph drove me nuts when Ralph was the co-host. So it was good. I felt like I was able to maybe add a little balance, a little bit more than Ralph. No offense, Ralph, if you're watching, but.
Well, our viewers, I'm sure, appreciate you being as co-host, and you added a big dimension to the show, and I'm grateful. And as I say, the viewers are grateful, and best wishes and good luck on the next phase of your life. And I know you're going to invest a lot more time in your family and, private matters, and that's healthy. So, that's terrific. I think I support you all the way, and the viewers do too. But let's now get down to some business. So you guys are working late Tuesday night. That would be December 8th. You had a council meeting. Some controversial stuff came up. The first one I wanted to talk about, there was something going on with the fire department budget. Well, actually, let me just lay a couple sentences on the table and I'll pass it off to you. What was unusual last night was that the Wallingford Fire Department said that they are projected to run a shortfall in their replacement pay line item. And it was a big one. And that's why we're talking about it, because it's so big, it's so unusual that this is the one we're going to talk about, $650,000. And the chief came and sort of explained it, but I think it took over an hour to exhaust all the questions and concerns councilors had. What's your takeaway on all that?
Well, the meeting, if you are a follower of Wallingford politics, I thought last night's meeting was amazing because it included on all these different issues. It had kind of a little bit for everybody. And it actually had two of the worst arguments for something I've ever heard as a counselor, which were not on this issue. We'll get to the other where I heard those. I had two of the worst arguments or worst points. but this, I feel like this meeting last night set the stage for the budget for next year. I think that some of the arguments you heard last night, they're going to come back, and they're going to come back not just with this, they're going to come back a lot, and I'll get into that. Let's talk fire, specifically with the fire. I'm going to not correct you, but I'm going to argue it wasn't unusual, because we now know, and we always knew, but it was something as a counselor, I never looked at it. The replacement pay line was always a line that was getting switched or bumped up every year. In fact, if you go back 4 budgets, it's been changed. It's been underfunded by an average of about $158,000 per year. This is just, I went back 4 budgets. So what happens with this line, there's a staffing model that they have to staff a shift. Are we
Can
going
I
to get into this?
interrupt you for a minute
Yeah.
and explain what replacement pay is for our viewers so they
Yeah.
can get in step here?
Yeah, very, very high caveman explanation. There's 12 people who have to staff a shift at the fire department. Let's say that one of those 12 people, whatever that, they're a firefighter, if they're a paramedic, whatever their role is, if they call out sick, they take vacation, they have to get a replacement person to staff the shift to make sure that the truck can run, or that they can go out and do their job. They have to pay that person, I think it's time and a half. They have to pay that person. And so that's what replacement pay is. So this is not a new phenomenon. It's always been something that happens. People get sick, people take vacations. What is new is the degree to which this is happening. It's happening a lot more, and there were different reasons given in terms of some full-time people out on disability. The chief talked about, so they have to replace them every shift that they would have worked. Some backed up vacation time because of COVID, where people were not taking vacation in the first half of the year. They're taking vacation now. So it was kind of, those were some of the reasons the chief gave. There were some other things that we got into. Really, for me, the elephant in the room was, well, what about the staffing model? Because the staffing model, as of July 1, switched. We went to a different model. And I asked the question, just like I'm kind of saying it now. I said, if you had the old staffing model, would you still need $600,000? They didn't, again, for the viewers, they're projecting a $600,000 need. They're only coming to us for a chunk of it last night, for about 167,000, I think is the number. But they're saying they're going to come back for the other 5 or 433, whatever the other is. And I asked the fire chief, I said, well, do you think that is this a byproduct of the model that you changed? And he was kind of like, I don't think it is. But he admitted, he said, we don't have a lot of experience with this model. And he said, yeah. And we walked through some of the numbers on the replacement pay line. And I said what I said to you, how they've been, every year it looks like this number gets underfunded, just not this much. He said last year it was intentional. They had some attrition. They knew they had some extra money in the regular salary line. So he said last year really wasn't a big deal, but he did say in other years it's a moving target. And historically they've been fortunate because they've had open positions. They've been able to compensate within their budget. But this year, again, because of all these things, now let me just add one thing on the reason. There's a resident, Mr. Garlick. You had him on your show. I was not on the show that week. I think you interviewed him on the show a few weeks ago. He's a former volunteer firefighter in town. He's been dialing into our meetings, very articulate. He asked the same question I asked when it got to the public comment. He asked it much better and in much more detail. And he kind of walked through the staffing changes, and it was very respectful. But at the end of that exchange, there was kind of an agreement to disagree, where he definitely felt as a firefighter, he's like, no, it's your staffing model. That's why this is happening. He said, you've always had FMLA issues. You've always had the vacation time issues. What's changed is the staffing model. The fire chief did not necessarily agree. But again, when I was questioning them, he said, we do need more experience. So I think it's a perfect storm. But that's not even what I'm talking about, is not the part that I think is fascinating. This is just to lay out what happened. So we approved the money, obviously. But I think, my friend Tom Laffin spent a lot of time questioning on this. He had some great questions. And Tom spent a lot of time talking about, well, how are we going to pay for this? And Tom didn't go all the way, but where Tom was going was, this is an I told you so about the budget. That's what this was going to be. And I told you so. And by that, I mean, we passed a zero tax increase last year. To help facilitate the zero tax increase, we reduced the contingency account, which is sort of the extra money the town keeps for situations like this. And so they're dipping into that now. But there's $100,000 less in that account than there would have been in the mayor's budget. Now, so, you know, I can see this already sort of playing out. And then the mayor responded, and Mr. Bose responded, and the mayor basically said, well, to fund it, you know, we're going to have to maybe not buy a capital item. And that's how we'll fund it, because, you know, we're not, you know, that's how we have to do it. And I immediately challenged that. And I said, well, that's a choice. That's not how you have to do it. If you decide not to buy, Public Works wants another snowplow, and you say for 300,000, you say, well, I'm not going to buy that. I'm going to use that money to offset this replacement pay. That's fine. You choose to do that, but don't act like that's the only thing. And I said, can't you go take it from the general fund, which is the 16 million unassigned dollars that just sits there? And they confirmed, yes, we could do that too. So I wanted to make sure that I got that point on the record, because this is, I believe this is the beginning of an ongoing argument. And I think this example with the firefighters, we're going to see it over and over and over again as we head into the next budget as a reason to not mess with the mayor's budget. And I think if that's the argument, I have a lot of it. It's very misleading, almost philosophically bankrupt argument, but I can get more into that.
Well, let's get into it now, because you're on a roll. Why do you say that?
Well, for starters, let's start number one. If we had not touched the mayor's budget, if we'd done nothing but rubber stamp it, which I've done that, I voted for it for 4 years on the council of my 5, there would still be a problem. They would still, the fire department, we would be in the same situation. They would need a little less money than they need now. They would need, I'm sorry, they would still need the same amount of money, but there would be $100,000 more in contingency. Okay, fair enough. And the other concern that was raised last night was, because, you know, contingency is typically used when we have a big winter with snow, and if Public Works exhausts its overtime pay, they dip into contingency. So now there's, and that's another line that we did reduce the overtime pay by I think another 100,000. So there's $200,000 here that would have been there in these two lines that would have given us a little more cushion. Okay, fine. But again, if you think about all the winters, we didn't do that. We've had a lot of warm winters. If you want to count all the winters, I think I actually did this. I think in 12 of the last 17 years, contingency ended the year with hundreds of thousands of dollars unspent. So that money, where does that money go? It goes in the general fund. It's sitting there. So there is, again, $16 million sitting there that could offset this. I think the fundamental, I think it's dishonest to try to go there to say it's the zero tax increase, when it's actually, maybe it's a budgeting flaw by a town department. And I'm not trying to throw shade. They said it themselves that this line has always been an issue, and we just never paid attention. And now it's more of an issue. And why is it more of an issue? Well, I think that's where the truth is a little bit, is it just the FMLA? Is it the new model? We can argue that till the sun rises, but this is an issue regardless of whatever budget we pass. This is an issue, and it's a fundamental budgeting issue. It's something that we have to look at. And the other thing, I'm on a roll. When we did the budget last year, we did that whole zero tax increase. There were two components to it. We had some spending reductions, which is about 400,000, which is what I've been talking about. And we used the rest of it. The 800,000 was diverting money from cap and non, which was sort of the using savings, which really wasn't savings. But those were the two components. There was unanimous support on the town council in June for the spending cuts. I want to repeat that. There was unanimous support on the Wallingford Town Council, 9 votes. And the reason I know that is there was a motion made the night of the budget workshop to separate the two components of the budget deal, to separate them. So we would vote separately. We would vote on the cuts. They weren't cuts, they were reductions and increases. And then we would vote on the other part of it. And the Vice Chair Laffin made that motion. And he was one of the no votes on the budget because, as he said, I don't have a problem with these spending reductions. My problem is with the rest of it, which is fair point. That's fine. That motion failed. That motion got 3 votes. My vote, because I was fine separating it. I was going to vote Chairman Cervone's vote and Tom's vote. So anybody sitting here now who is going to argue, this is what happens when you touch the mayor's budget and do a 0 tax increase. So hold on a minute. Any issue here is a result of the reductions, and everyone was on board with everyone on the council. No councilor sat there last year and argued the reductions. The only people against this budget argued against the other part of how it was done with the cap and non-stuff. So that's another element of this. So again, this is, I believe this firefighter, I think you're going to see this on everything. So let me give you, I know you're itching to talk, but I'm going to keep going here. Community pool. Okay. Community pool costs about $170,000 to run. This is the old pool, the existing pool. That 170 is divided between Parks and Rec and Public Works. It's split in those budgets depending on where you see it. Chemicals, lifeguards. It was cut last year. The mayor cut it, rightfully so. The mayor was right with COVID. We weren't opening the pool. If anybody wants to, now I'm not even convinced we should open the pool this year. I'm still not sure where COVID's going to be in July. So let me just be clear. If the mayor doesn't want to put it in this year, I'm probably with him on this. My point being though, if I wasn't, or if any counselor says, no, let's open the pool again, let's keep the old pool going, the response is going to be, well, hold on a minute. Look what happened with the firefighters. We don't have the money. Scott Hanley's position, which has been funded for 50 years. Hold on a minute. We don't have the money. So my point is, I think what you saw last night was the laying of the groundwork when we get into the budget of don't mess with the mayor's budget. That's how I saw it anyway. When I heard the arguments, going back and forth with, well, how are we going to pay for this? And I'm thinking to myself, we're sitting on a $26 million general fund, 16 of which we all agree is unassigned. I know you believe more of it is actually available, but I'm just going with the conservative 16 million. And we haven't even seen the CAFR yet. That 16 million is as of June 30th. The town spent $8.5 million under its budget as of the June monthly report. Now, I haven't looked at the revenue side of it. We'll have to see what the audit says in a few weeks. But I think, anyway, I'm sorry to go on and on, but I have an issue. I have zero issue. If people don't like the way the budget was done, totally cool with that. We can agree to disagree. But to somehow try to now, 7 months later, blame it, try to sort of shift the blame. I'm not trying to blame anybody, but let's talk about root cause. What is the root cause of this problem? It has nothing to do with the 0 tax increase. What it has to do with is an underfunded line in a budget that's been a historic problem. And now, it's blown up, and maybe it ties to a staffing model. So I'll stop. Your reaction to my role reversal. Your reaction to my comments.
Well, I would just fill in a couple of blanks.
Sure.
Some data. The recent history of the replacement pay line from fiscal year ending, I'm looking at my notes here, fiscal year ending 2017 to fiscal year ending 2020, that went up by 42%. And now it's going to go up another huge amount. Last year's budget for this line, the revised budget, was $1 million. I'm using rounded numbers. But the projection is that this now going to go from 1 million to 1.4 million.
Right.
That is subject to change. And, they are very careful to say, things might get better and maybe this is a worst case scenario. So the increase in the replacement pay line is an eye opener. And I agree with you that regardless of the budget model, this requested increase in the projected shortfall should grab anyone's attention and should be a cause for concern and very close scrutiny when they come back, which they projected, the fire department projected, they'll be back for the second tranche. That's the word they use, the second slice of money in middle of January or beginning of February, and they would give us a better read on, as to how much more money, they would want. I think I hear you're saying, I'll phrase it this way, sounds like you're steeling yourself, bracing yourself for taking the brunt of criticism down the road. If someone says, well, we're not, well, this is a fantastic little example that wouldn't happen. We may not be plowing the roads as much because of what Chris Shortell did in giving us a zero tax increase. I'm
No, I didn't.
overstating that, but I sense that's kind of what's under your skin there.
But I think what it would be was they're going to plow the roads. What they're not going to, but then we're not, but here's what's going to happen. We're going to get our budget books. And in the budget book, and I fully expect we're going to see, we'll see what the numbers say. There's going to be a snowplow or a piece of equipment for, again, maybe $100,000, and it's going to be in there, and we're going to get an explanation. Oh, well, that was in last year's, but we didn't do it last year. We couldn't afford it because of the fire thing, and because contingency was cut, we had to cut something. And my response is, well, you could have bought it last year. You just could have gotten it out of the general fund, which is what I said last night. And they agreed. They said, yeah, we could. It was a choice. But instead of using old tax money, no, we got to use new tax. Well, that's a choice, and that's fine if that's the choice. Let me be clear though. There's two ways to look at this, and I'm sort of on board with one way. First of all, I agree with how they're doing it, just getting a little bit at a time. For viewers of the show, with the way the finances are structured, town departments can transfer money within the department all the time, but they can't transfer money between departments until April 1, till the end of the fourth quarter of the fiscal year. So I raised this last night as well. We have a number of open positions. I mentioned, Craig Turner left in June, I think, and his position was only filled recently. And he was one of the top, he was a department head. He was very, he was one of the higher paid people at town hall. That money was budgeted. That money isn't going anywhere. And I know from my past budgets, they average the town about $500,000 in salary that's left over. And that's not a criticism. It's the nature of they're a 1,300 person employer. People retire, people get other jobs. They have to fill the position. There's a process. They may take their time to fill the position. So that's fine. But it just works out that there's always extra money in salary because of that. So when I asked Mr. Bose last night, I said, can you tell me from July 1 till now, which is the fiscal year we're in, how many open positions do we have? What do the dollars look like? What are we saving? Not just on salary, but benefits, because it's all savings. And it's really maybe a question more for Jim Hutt, the personnel director. Mr. Bose didn't have the answer that at his fingertips, which is fine, but he did say, he said, I don't know if everyone caught it, we have more open positions than we normally have. That was something he said. So we know in a normal year, there's about $500,000 that comes out of the open positions across all the departments, but he's saying there's more. He doesn't know how much more in terms of the actual positions. So my point simply is, and he actually said, come April 1st, yeah, he basically said, yes, we are going to look to that money to that's how we want to do it. And I'm fine with that approach, totally fine with them bringing in that extra money that was taxed and using it to offset this. I am also fine, as we go into a new budget, with the argument we can't do a zero tax increase next year because we got to bump up some of these line items that have been underfunded. I'm open to that argument. I'm not married to a zero tax increase. What I am, though, gonna again just argue against is any kind of intellectually dishonest argument that tries to say, well, the problem we're in now is because of the zero increase. No, it's not. So that's where I am on.
So I just want to put a little bit of meat on the bones about this replacement pay in the most simplistic way, because it involves a lot of detail that is beyond the scope of this episode. And if I stray, I'm going to look to you to sort of pick things up here after I'm done. But this new staffing model for the fire department did the following. It reduced the number of firefighters that would be on the job, that would be on the job, because over time, there've been fewer calls for fires and more calls for medical. So as I understand the rationale, reducing the number of firefighters on the job was intended to save some money. Alongside of that, there were increases in the EMT, the emergency medical technician staff, to cover the increase in medical calls. So because there are fewer firefighters on the job, it's my personal observation that each firefighter now becomes more indispensable in case there's a fire, because there's few of them to go around. And what that may mean, just in my view, that there is less flexibility on behalf of the chiefs to say when the entire shift doesn't show up, it's not as easy to say, we'll make do with what we have. Part of that's a labor contract issue, but part of that's because there's just fewer firefighters out there. So there's more pressure to call in someone to replace the guy that called in to say, I'm taking a vacation day, or for some reason I can't go to work. And there's an appearance, at least, that the new staffing model puts increased pressure on replacement pay, and that may always be the case. And so we're going to have to look when, the fiscal year is over, whether or not the promise of controlling the rise of salaries, of compensation in the fire department budget, whether that promise is really coming true, or has replacement pay, the increase in replacement pay sort of made that promise less credible. Chris, I'm going to go to you to sort of mop up whatever details I might have gotten wrong, because I kind of was winging it there. But
yeah, no, I think you got it right. I just think it's unclear. Reasonable people can disagree on these causes, and they did last night. And I don't know, so yes, what you're saying is an argument as to why it happened. I think it contributed to it. I don't know to what extent. They need $600,000 extra. Is 200 of that because of the new model? And then 200 of that is because there's people out on FMLA, and then the other 200 they always need. That's where I can't give, in my own mind, I haven't figured out where and I don't think anyone has. I mean, I know Mr. Garlick certainly feels like when he spoke, it's all the new model. When I hearing the chief talk, I feel like it's a perfect storm. I think the new model is part of it. I would almost argue if the new model didn't exist, it still sounds like I understand the COVID thing with vacations, and he has people, the chief said he has more people out on disability than he's ever had before. So I think, to your point, yeah, this new model puts pressure on these other things that still would have caused problems. So, but I think you captured that aspect of it, the new model, staffing model. I think you did capture it well, and I think you're right. We have to keep an eye on it. And the model, look, this is what test and learn. You have to.
I didn't mean to suggest that the new model was responsible for all or even most. There's a lot of causes.
Yep.
But I did want to make the point that the new model certainly doesn't help, and it appears, to me at least, that it's putting pressure on replacement pay. But the replacement pay line has existed for a long, long time. People have always been out for a lot of different reasons, workers' comp injuries among them. And whether or not this year is particularly different, and if so, by how much money it can be attributable to unusual workers' comp absences, we don't know. We haven't run the numbers. We don't have the data. We may never have the data, but something to keep an eye on. Let's go to another topic.
Yep.
Up for grabs last night was the future of the town-owned land behind the old train station. Let's call it the Brothers parking lot, but it's all of the town-owned land going forward. That was up for a vote because the funding to reconstruct that parking lot was on the line. It required a vote of the council to accept grant money, appropriate grant money, and also to reappropriate old money that had been previously appropriated for this parking lot. It had grown stale and the time limits had run out, so that needed to be reappropriated. And the vote was very lopsided. I think only one person voted no. Is that right? I think Gina Morgenstein said no, that she had a different idea of this. So I have a lot to say about it. So do you, but let's start with you because this is your final show. We're going to give you a lot of free passes. We're going to give you a lot of slack, a lot of rope. What do you got?
I don't want to argue. I mean, I really don't want to argue about it again.
Well,
I mean, all the argument here is, I think.
I don't mean an argument, but we do need to review, you know, what happened and just your perceptions as to what happened.
Well, I think, look, if I could have scripted, you know, I took a playwriting class once and I've written a few little one-act play. If I could have done a play of who would say what and I probably could have scripted out most of how this went. There were a couple of things that were said that blew me away. Two things blew me away. But it passed 7-1. Craig wasn't there. Gina voted against it. So again, just like the vote to buy it 2 years ago was 7-1. I think Jason was the one that was absent that night, and Craig was the no vote that night 2 years ago. So similar margin of whatever victory. But you know, I guess my takeaways from it are this. Number one, not a heck of a lot of public opposition to this. Not a heck of a lot. Now you're gonna, oh my God, there's an online petition. Yeah, there's an online petition. You know how many of those people showed up last night? I don't know, 4, maybe 5 to count. How many people? 5 people from the public showed up to comment. I made the point. I was at the planning and zoning by accident. I was at the planning and zoning meeting in October when this came up to planning and zoning. And you know how many people that so I was there for the outdoor dining stuff. And it was later on. Go ahead. You want to talk?
Well, I want to make sure we don't run out of time on this topic. If we concede your point.
No, well, I just want to
a lot of public participation. What is the point? Why does that matter?
The point is I made the point last night. I was at the planning and zoning, and there was like one person that argued against. No one came that night, basically. And
why should they? That's a planning and zoning issue.
Well,
it has nothing to do with policy as to how to use the land.
Nope. The reason is COVID. COVID is what kept people away from rallying, and that if that meeting was virtual, if that planning and zoning meeting was virtual, you would have had a gaggle. I don't know how much is a gaggle. You would have had hundreds of people. So here's my. That was the first thing. I sat there and I scratched my head. I'm like, well, this meeting's virtual, right? The meeting I was in was virtual, so COVID wasn't stopping anybody last night from coming out. And
but I'm still. So what?
That people. That's right. So what? People are not against this. There's this sort of attempt. That's always one of the arguments on these issues is, well, everyone in town doesn't want to do it.
Well, wait a minute. Whoa.
Not you.
You're saying people aren't against it, but maybe they're also not for it.
I'm just saying that they didn't show up last night, and at the meeting I was at in person, that meeting in the planning and zoning meeting, there were at least 10 people that came. The whole contingent of people did come out to speak on behalf of the woman who bought the old bank.
I'm still not with you. And is your best argument that everyone knew this was going on? It wasn't no article in the paper that this was going to happen, but your best argument that people knew what was going on and they're okay with it, so you have license to vote yes? Is that your argument?
My argument was that it was a counter argument to the argument that there would be more opposition to this if it weren't for COVID, and more people would have come out. And I think that's ridiculous, because nobody really came out last night. There have been articles in the paper, and people did come out for the wellness center and P&Z. They came out for that. So somehow COVID was, you know, people felt passionately, rightfully so, about changing the regs for that woman who bought the chiropractor, who bought the bank building. People did not feel as passionately about this, as evidenced by the lack. So that was my first point. And you know, I think another point that was raised was someone said there are 6 parking lots within walking distance already. And they cited Holy Trinity Church, which is my church. The town can use that. Mike, what do you think about the town of Wallingford using Holy Trinity Church's parking lot for parking?
I'll tell you what I think.
Tell me what you think.
I'll tell you what I think. I think it is possible and plausible in the course of exercising due diligence, which has not occurred,
Okay.
despite this transformational decision. There was no due diligence, but a part of due diligence, if someone was serious about investigating different plans and alternatives, someone from the town might have gone to Holy Trinity Church, and I'm going to make up a number to illustrate the point. This is not a real number. But they may have said, you know, in order for you to allow shared parking during certain hours, certainly not on Sundays, and you can block it off, you know, for weddings and things like that. Here's a check per year, the Holy Trinity Church for, I'm making the number up, $10,000. Holy Trinity Church would then could say, we don't want your guys parking here, no. Or they could say, you know, we could really use it and it's not going to impact our operations. Whether or not Holy Trinity would have said yes or no is beside the point. The point is, maybe there's mutual interest. Maybe Holy Trinity could use that cash. And the same thing with Napa Auto Parts parking lot down Route 5. You drive by there and what do you see? You drive down Route 5 towards Meriden, you look to your left and you see open asphalt. The parking lot is never used. It's a waste. If someone went to that organization and made the same offer, they could say yes or no, here's 10 grand. Allow us to use this as shared parking, 10 grand a year. Maybe they would have said yes. So I think that it's a part of a due diligence and a true exploratory as to what is feasible, rather than not using due diligence and just saying, well, Holy Trinity, what a silly argument. It wasn't a silly argument. They're serious. That could have had possibilities.
Okay, well, I just know that I've been at council meetings when we used to have a prayer by a local clergyman or woman, and if they were a Christian, they slipped up. Whenever they slip up and use the word Jesus, someone from the public calls that out and says you're violating the Constitution by doing that. But if you're telling me, I guess that wouldn't have. So church and state, we can't even put voting machines in
This
Holy.
has nothing to do with church and state. This is property owner to property owner.
Okay,
you know, they own land. So
okay, because I've been, even in my time on the council, my limited time on the council, I've experienced the fierce pushback on things like that. But I guess we can go and use their parking lot.
Well, not without their consent, but if they say, yeah, we'd like you to do that and we could use the money, has nothing to do with religious dogma or advancing your religion. Buying their parking lot, or not buying it, but
didn't we used to vote in church halls? Didn't there used to be vote when I was a kid? You could vote in church halls, and now we don't vote in church halls anymore.
Yeah, I think that was the mayor's decision, that he wanted to have control over polling places.
Okay.
And I think that was the reason for that.
Okay, well, then maybe
go ahead. Keep going.
I don't have it. I guess you're right. So we should have. I guess my only other point on this was, and I made this point last night. I'm not going to kill it. Any counselor in the last 26 months could have brought this back to the council, had an administrative update on the plan, proposed alternate plans, brought in, asked subject department heads to come in, floated your concept about, making an offer. This all could have been done. No one did it on the council. So, and I will tell you, it was on October 23rd, 2018, that town council, though I was part of it, 8 of us were part of it. The people who voted that night, it was crystal clear to all 8 of us, this was going to be a parking lot. So anyone to say last night, oh, where are the other plans, this and that? Well, I agree, you want the administration to look at other stuff, but they were clear 2 years ago, this is what we're doing. So where, now you, and I use this, the counselors could have pushed back on that publicly, use the power of our bully pulpit, which you and I've talked about many times, that many counselors are afraid to use. This could have been easily brought back to the council multiple times, generated more newspaper articles, generated public, interest, everything you're saying. And it was not done. So I'm not going to sit, I just feel like, and I don't know. It's hard for me to accept all the not for me, but I mean, the criticism of this process, when to me, it was clear from that vote 2 years ago what it was going to be. And the people that didn't like it did nothing about it. Nothing.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, I'm not going to argue that. I think that's a very fair point. And I think the counselors that were indecisive when the property was bought in 2018, but sort of went along to go along. Yeah, I think they had an obligation to flesh this out and to, bring it in public. And I also think it points out one of my longstanding gripes about the abuse of executive session. When you guys go into executive session and decide something, the public is not is not involved, and anyone can say anything about what happened in executive session. And even me, because I have some idea what went on in executive session, and it's your view that all 8 counselors were absolutely in favor of a parking lot in 2018, and because it's an executive session, I can't prove you wrong. Wait, and you can't prove me wrong.
I'm not saying
it's all secret.
No.
It shouldn't have been. It shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I didn't say in favor. What I said, and I'm not even saying it was in executive session because I don't remember. It's blending for me. There was an executive session that night. We have several executive sessions before leading up to the purchase of the property. And then, but there were also there was a public portion. So I don't remember that precisely. What I'm telling you is whether you were for it or against it, it was crystal clear what the plan was, and nobody can say it wasn't. So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So let's talk about the merits of this briefly.
Yeah.
Obviously, the point is, where do we go from here? That's really where this all leads, because the decision has now been made. It will be a parking lot. But just a little bit of context from my end. I think it was you who said, I'm not sure, we don't really need a park, don't really need another park. And that shows me that I was absolutely unclear about the fundamental reason for the park. And that's my fault. If people came away with, do we need a park, yes or no, then I botched the explanation. The issue is not whether we need a park. This is not about a park. This is about the downtown and how to change the trajectory of the downtown. Just like you can shock a well with chlorine, in my view,
Like a what?
a well, a well, periodically you purify it with.
No, I thought you said a whale, and I'm like, gosh, Mike, what have you been up to? What do you do when you kayak? Shock a whale? How do you even go about doing that? Aren't you like a Sierra Club guy? You're shocking whales with chlorine.
I get you. Well taken. I'm glad you.
I'm sorry. I was like, okay,
but
go ahead.
The point of the park is not to add a park. That's part of it. But the point is to do something dramatic to the lower downtown that will change and transform that lower downtown. Now, some people may not value that. I personally do. A parking lot will not change forever the look and atmosphere of the downtown, probably make it worse, but a park will. So again, you don't need another park, but you need something there. And that was a reason why, part of the reason why I advocated for a park. Let me finish. The thing that disappointed me most was that the Republican Party nationally, statewide, likes to bill itself as the party of business and business-like methods, to give close scrutiny to dollars and cents, look at things like return on investment and money. They sort of enjoy that stereotype, whereas the Democrats, oh, they're just tax and spend. Okay, so here we are at a council meeting last night, and we have an asset that no one knows what it's worth. Very interesting. No one knows what it's worth. No one, Republicans too. So, Democrats and Republicans. No one said, before we make a decision on this asset, let's try to find out what we could get for it. Just trying to be a good Republican here, really. And let's use hypothetical numbers. Probably I'm in the order of magnitude. Let's suppose we get an appraisal that comes back at 600 grand. Remember, this is 1.3 acres in a spot that some may see as desirable. There are disadvantages to it, but it is 1.3 acres. And so now the decision becomes, we could sell this for something like $600,000, and that would be good. And after we sell it, we would get a project that would be producing taxes. So that's one possibility. Or we could make a parking lot out of this. And I would think it would be a very close question. Actually, it shouldn't be for those that like to count dollars and cents. Putting the issue in that context, it's very reasonable to say, whoa, let's not make this a parking lot, because that's not going to do anything in the near term. And no one with any credibility can promise any results. I mean, I've heard about aspirational plans from Economic Development Commission, from counselors that in favor. Jamie Hines said that's a pipe dream, and I agree. That is a pipe dream. That's a field of dreams. You can put a parking lot there, which closes off every other possibility, and you've lost the possibility of getting 600 grand and a tax producing entity. So I'm saying, wow, there was no plan here, no due diligence. And Vinny Testa had a remark I kind of 50% agree with. Why didn't the council do more? And he said, well, we're not in charge. Well, to some extent, he's right. The other side of your argument that council was too passive is that the administration, dropped the ball on a plan, bringing in the public, exercising due diligence, and offering choices because they didn't want a choice. This was the only choice. Forget about the 600 grand, forget about the tax producing entity that was in the foreseeable future, rather than some distant pipe dream, which may never occur. And that's what disappointed me the most, that no one pushed for that. And I kind of feel like, let's just wash our hands of the whole lower downtown. That parking lot's now going to be a wet blanket, and things are not going to pop up like mushrooms. And finally, and maybe this is the most important point, one of the rationales, and this seems to have taken center stage, one of the rationales for buying the parking lot is this old train station needs parking. Well, that's hardly due diligence. That's a conclusion that you really jump to. But if the notion is we've got to repurpose that old train station and it needs parking, who has taken that bull by the horns? Those that wanted the parking lot had the responsibility and the duty to push that forward. Council leadership, frankly, had in my view, and still does have, the obligation and duty to push that forward. And the plan of conservation and development, that was in their job jar to, move that train station in some way. You and I had talked about it, and you were very concerned with what was going to happen to Sal Menzo. And I had to sort of brush you aside a little bit and say, he's a big boy, he's going to take care of himself, but we have bigger fish to fry. So if you want to, use that parking lot on the basis of that old train station, who's going to get off the dime and move that forward? And when is that going to happen? Because a lot of valuable time is wasted. I don't see, much happening. And frankly, the Economic Development Commission, if they want to put forward something cohesive that makes sense, they would have packaged this together. They would have said, after we repurpose that train station, after we find a buyer or a tenant, after we, somehow transform that train station and we see a need for parking, then it's time to go for a reconstructed parking lot. That makes a heck of a lot more sense than what happened this way, than what happened last night. But the Economic Development Commission measures success in terms of asphalt, bricks, glass, mortar, and construction, rather than urban planning, rather than a holistic approach. And I think undue deference was given to their narrow portfolio. Instead, there should have been an urban planner to put this all together as a comprehensive plan and say, first, we're going to get adult ed out of the train station. Next, we're going to market the train station. Then we're going to see, if we need additional parking. And then we're going to see if parking can't be established somewhere else. And there's other locations where you can do it. Some of that is in Fishbein Park. You could carve out parking spaces there. Don't ridicule that idea just yet. You've never studied it. It's just an idea. Don't pull it, oh, we'd never do parking in Fishbein Park. I don't care if you could carve out 20 parking spaces. We're not going to, no. You can't jump to those conclusions. Part of due diligence is taking every rational idea and running it down and see if it all makes sense. So I'm going to take a break, and I didn't get my glass of water. Otherwise, I would have taken some sips, but it's your turn now.
Nothing. I need to be shocked with chlorine. All right. I was taking notes. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things I want to respond to in your monologue. So let
me warn you, you got to triage all that in pithily.
All right, I'll be pithy. What percentage? Because I'm honestly asking this. What percentage of the property would you put a park on? Like there's the brothers lot. There's the part we already own. When you talk about a park, maybe all of it or some of it?
Right. It was represented last night that all of the town-owned property back there is 1.3 acres. Yeah. Okay. So I would say the target would be about 1.1 acres to 1.3. Let's see how the design turns out. Let's see what space rationally can be used for additional municipal parking. The devil's in the details there, but I would say I would target about 1.1 acres for that park. Okay. And 0.2 acres for additional, open parking slots.
Okay, got it. That's what I wanted to understand. All right, next question. Let's pretend it's 5 years from now, and a developer comes now. So let's just assume the parking lot. Assume there's no referendum. Parking lot happens because it already referendum. What do we have? 45 days. Parking lot happens. Okay. So I want to do, I'm a Star Trek fan, and Star Trek has a lot of, episodes with alternate timelines. So in one timeline is this timeline that you and I are in, where the parking lot is a done deal. And 5 years from now, a developer comes in and says, I am going to buy the Sovacs, the property with the vacuum places on. I'm going to buy the property the liquor store is on. I'm in town. I want to buy your 1.3 acres because I'm going to put a mixed use something there. I'm going to take advantage of all your wonderful tax incentives. 5 years from now, in a different timeline, an alternate timeline, the Brodinsky Memorial Park was built using 1.1 acres of that for parking, for greenery. It's beautiful. There's a fountain, there's a statue of you, there's a kiosk where you can access minutes and agendas from all the meetings.
You get the idea now. You're on track.
I'm on track.
You're on track.
Same offer comes in. Which timeline is more likely for the town council in 2025 to sell it to a developer? The park timeline or the parking lot timeline?
So we're talking about timelines, and I'm not sure that I understand your question, but I'm going to do the best I can. If the property is going to be sold to a developer, the best way to accomplish that is to have it professionally marketed. The worst way is to put another use on there and send a signal that it's a park and a parking lot, because I think it's a real long shot that a developer driving by seeing a park is going to say, I think I'll make an offer on this property anyway. And I think at that point, first of all, the hypothetical is so fantastic, I don't think it would ever happen. And I think at that point, a council would say, no, it's a park and we like it. Once a park, always a park. That's my view of it. Did I answer your question?
Well, you half answered it. So, okay, I agree with you. But I'm saying, but what if it's a parking lot in 5 years? You still think the council's not going to do anything? The council's going to say, nope, we put $270,000, well, more. We bought the, for what we did, we put more than that because we bought the brothers' property. But Nope, we're not selling it to you. You can't put your Eastern Mountain Sports here. You can't put your
No,
whatever.
I get you. I get you. I get you. So let me cut you off in the interest of time. So 5 years from now, there is a beautiful parking lot there. A developer drives by and says, I'll offer you 3 times market value. I'll make good on every dime you put in there, plus a huge profit of $1 million. Would you go for it? I think the council would go for it. The question is, what are the odds of that really happening? Is that what you bank on as your exit ramp to a poor decision, that this possibly may happen?
I didn't. No, I didn't talk about the price. Forget the price.
Well,
I'm just saying.
Well, that's so important. That's so important because money solves everything. You throw enough money at it, you could certainly lure the council, tempt the council. Sure.
So you think, okay, but that's not really, you're twisting my choice. What I'm simply getting at is, you said that it closes off every possibility, and I disagree with that.
Okay.
I think that a parking lot is easier to undo than a park is in any scenario. That's what I think. That's where I was trying to lead you, and I didn't think you would go, you resisted, which is fine.
Chris, we're going to run out of time. Let's make this a wrap.
Okay.
And I want to thank our viewers for watching. I want to thank WPAA TV for putting the show up on its channel weekdays at 9 o'clock. Just thank everyone involved in the season of the Citizen Mike Show, the guests that we've had. And good luck to you on on what's coming up. Good night, Chris. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
See you next time.